Did you ever go to a party and wonder, would anyone really miss me if I weren't here? That's Survivor Series. Nah, look, there's a fair bit of affection for the neglected stepchild of the Big Four. That's despite lazy booking that's seen the show's signature match become almost synonymous with brand warfare that nobody really cares about. But wrestling fans are traditionalists at heart, and a calendar without Survivor Series would probably leave us feeling a bit funny. Like when you go back to your hometown and your favourite record store is turned into a vape emporium. So a show like this one needs to kick off with a bang worthy of the lengthy history of the name. Your opener sets the tone for the night ahead, so you want to make sure you get it right, don't you? Well, viewer, they don't always. We're recording this before last night's show, so let's just hope that whatever open proceedings in Chicago didn't stink the place out, and here are the 10 worst Survivor Series opening matches ever. Number 10, Team Raw vs Team SmackDown 2016. This was still relatively fresh into the return of the brand split that at least gave the semblance of change, although knowing how quickly that would go the way of the dodo means these nostalgia specs are at least 3 sizes too small. Before the match, Team Captain Nikki Bella is taken out backstage, which leads to a frankly heinous platter of acting from Bella, Daniel Bryan, and Natalya. Not you, medical man. You did fine with what you were given. And then the match is just uninspired and long. The wrestlers work hard and the crowd aren't asleep for it. It just doesn't have any spark to speak of. Eliminations feel both obvious and odd. SmackDown's number 2 heel Carmella is sent packing quickly by Alicia Fox of all people. Sasha eats an unnecessary pin. Nia Jax is presented as a dominant force only to then tap out, and then the end just happens. No ceremony, no massive moment, just 2 people, finisher, ring the bell. Well, alright then. Thank you, I suppose. Number 9, Steve Blackman, Crash and Molly Holly vs TNA and Trish 2000. In spite of its presence here on the worst of list, I actually broadly like this match. I know, I'm a man of such contradictions. What an enigma. No, the real issue I have here is that it's just plotted out quite poorly. First of all, it's 5 minutes long, which for 6 people doesn't really give it a chance to go anywhere. And secondly, the focus of the story really is Molly and Trish. Molly had just debuted and it would take 84 lists to fit in all the good things I have to say about Molly Holly. Meanwhile, Trish has only had a handful of minutes in the ring, so she's still as green as Henry VIII's sleeves. That's a little history joke there. I am the professor after all. But because you have a newly debuted star going up against a woman who's still learning the ropes, you have to exercise a certain amount of smoke, mirrors, and subterfuge. These come in the form of the men in this match, who just sort of plonk themselves between the women and do a few bits and bobs amongst themselves. As a result, while it's a fine bit of entertainment, the match ends up feeling a bit disjointed and not as satisfying as it could or should be. Number 8, Christian vs Al Snow 2001. Build around the winner-take-all match, Survivor Series 2001 features the all-time great commentary team of JR and Paul Heyman do a great job of selling the idea that this is a make-or-break night for the entire wrestling industry, which is why it's just plain odd to me that on what I'm supposed to believe is the biggest night of the company, this is the match they picked to kick things off. There's nothing wrong with it, it's absolutely fine, but it's the coach from Tough Enough challenging for the tertiary belt held by a guy who had only just joined the Alliance. It's hardly the grudge match to kick off this world-altering occasion. Knowing the Alliance were going to dominate most of the evening, to my mind, you have 2 better choices for high drama. You either kick things off with Edge retaining the Intercontinental belt, start the night off on a high for WWF that seems to slip away bit by bit before the main event, or you do a showstopper of a cage match between the Hardys and the Dudleys, which ends with Jeff going for glory instead of taking the win to really light up the crowd. This was just a curious choice. Number 7, Head Shrinkers vs High Energy 1992. High Energy by name, High Energy by nature. The entrance of Coco Beware and Owen Hart as a team is delightfully camp, with a demonstration of their energy coming in the form of a cartwheel from Coco while Owen jumps in the air like he's celebrating his A-level results. And then there's the Head Shrinkers snarling away in the corner with Afa on the outside eating a chicken wing, which, I'm not gonna lie, it's giving dated mid-noughties sketch comedy. This is an extended squash match basically, designed to continue the momentum of the Head Shrinkers while giving Coco and Owen something to do. And they get off to a good start with some very high energy indeed. Owen Hart was quite a good wrestler, don't you know? But it all gets derailed with a cheap shot from Afa on the outside, which then puts the control firmly in the camp of the bad guys, who just sort of do a bit of pounding, stalking, and camera mugging. Owen gets a nice hot tag in, but it doesn't last very long. If you've got your mates coming around and you're pouring drinks and having a natter, you'd be forgiven for missing this match entirely. Number 6, The Dream Team vs the Enforcers 1989. Let's play a fun round of is it boring or is it just the 80s? I'm being flippant, put your pitchforks down. But in all honesty, the increased pace and athleticism of modern wrestling does make some of the classic stuff feel a bit stilted, and that's not exclusive to wrestling. Go back and watch some 80s football where people lose their minds over someone veering slightly to the left. There is some good stuff here, namely Rick Martel and Tito Santana. I found myself leaning forward a bit every time they got involved, not least because Rick Martel's gimmick of the model means he spends most of the match smiling while locking moves in, and that is just fabulous. But unfortunately, Santana gets eliminated far too early, and the rest of the match features a lot of plodding and rest holding. 22 minutes is far too long for rest holds, even if some of them are Rick Martel flexing while he's doing it. The match also loses points because at one point, Bad News Brown straight up just leaves, which is one of my least best tropes in these Survivor Series matches. It's also available in number 5, The Godfather D'Lo Brown and the Headbangers versus the Acolytes and the Dudleys, 1999. Hey, the crowd are enjoying themselves, I say to myself as I watch this match, but of course they are. This was 1999, the economy was pretty good, and all we needed to keep ourselves entertained was the mere presence of boobs. And because The Godfather reliably presents us with said boobs, he is over. It's the 90s. It's fun that D'Lo and the Headbangers get in on the Godfather act, but that's kind of where the fun starts and finishes. It's like they went, do the entrance, make the crowd happy, and since you're out there, you might as well do a couple of moves as well. And that they do. Rather than get yourself excited for the night ahead, this is more like something to entertain the ones who are already here while the rest take their seats. Even at 9 minutes, this match takes ages over nothing. And then Bradshaw takes out his own partner, which encourages Farouk to have a fight with Devon over who gets to do the pin, which is a bit dim because of the whole legal man thing, and then they brawl off into the back, leaving Bubba on his own, and that's why they lose, and that's f***ing stupid. Number 4, Mankind versus Dwayne Gill, 1998. The 98 edition of the show is a bit Marmite. Some people hate it because the wrestling on the wrestling show is bobbins. Others love it because it's a show-long narrative that twists and turns like a twisty-turny thing. Personally, I'm on the love it side of things, not least because the theme song absolutely slaps. But here's one for the bobbins camp. The first match of the night is a 30-second bit of bollocks. Vince comes out and hypes up Mankind's first opponent of the evening with prepared remarks that put him over as a natural athlete and someone with an unprecedented win-loss record. And it turns out to be Dwayne Gill. And alright, in fairness, it's a bit funny when he gets scared by his own pyro, but the match is a 30-second squash and it's the very first thing on the show. This entry on my list is longer than the match, I think. This is a tournament to crown a new WWF champion, and I know we're selling a story of McMahon trying to engineer his hand-picked winner here, but does it have to be what we start the show with? At this point in my list-making career, you know this is one of my pet peeves, this could have just been an angle on TV. Number 3, Team Raw versus Team SmackDown 2018. Last week I went on a bit about pacing, and I'm going to do the same here because by their very nature, these multi-person elimination matches take bloody ages. Opening the card, at the very least your audience aren't tuckered out, so you've got a nice bit of legroom for your goodwill, but that doesn't give you carte blanche to dick about, which is what they do here. We get a few quick-fire eliminations, which included Team Captain Naomi, feel that glow, and then everything else has big skip energy. There's no heat or rhythm to the eliminations, there's no flow to the match, but there is a dance break. There's also a double countout, and honestly, down with this sort of thing. It's probably one of the reasons the Survivor Series matches inspire apathy at best these days. That kind of elimination just makes you wonder why they're even here. Just do 4 on 4. And in the end, Nia wins in spite of screwing her own teammate over, but also she hasn't done anything in the match, so it all just feels really hollow. Oh, and it gets a brand supremacy ding too. Jesus wept. Number 2, Team Flair versus the Spirit Squad 2006. I did some quick maths, and Team Flair, comprised here of Dusty Rhodes, Sergeant Slaughter, Ron Simmons, Arn Anderson, and the titular Flair, has a combined age of 272. Obviously this exists purely as a nostalgia pop, but again it comes down to bad plotting. Ron Simmons gets eliminated first, which removes roughly 85% of the knee mobility from Team Flair, and as he goes he drags a Spirit Squad member back with him like a haggard boyfriend being hauled around Bicester shopping village. Shout out to the 3 of you who can relate. The Spirit Squad are supposed to be young athletes in their prime, so when they have a 3-1 advantage over Flair, who is now all on his own, it's absolutely ridiculous for him to overcome that. And I know he's still an active competitor and he's Ric Flair, but even so, it stretches suspension of disbelief quite far. And then that's compounded even more when Flair does get the win, only to be left laying by a beatdown from the squad anyway. Who does this help? And number 1, the Godwins, Billy Gunn and Road Dogg versus the Headbangers and the New Blackjacks, 1997. The 97 Survivor Series is a really quiet show where very little happens, and that's why nobody talks about it basically ever. Good heavens above, this is dull, but it deserves at least some credit for doing something kind of miraculous, and that is sending a Montreal pay-per-view crowd straight to sleep. On commentary, Lawler is putting over that he likes these guys because they just hit you, and I definitely agree there can be something impressive if you go the no flips just fists route, but this is hardly the poster child for it. I'm honestly struggling to stay awake just writing this. They hit a few clotheslines, there's some stuff in the corner. I think the most athletic thing they have going for them is a bulldog. At the very least, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn were settling into their Outlaws characters nicely, and they started to get some rumblings of heat with the crowd, so giving them the win was the right call. But that is damning with the faintest of praise. This is just brutal. Fortunately, the rest of the show passed without incident, and everything was fine. And that's our list. Did we miss any? Was I overly harsh? Be sure to tell me about it in the comments so I can read them and give more credence to my chronic imposter syndrome. But before you do, please make sure to like and subscribe for more of our silly little wrestling content, and then check out another list like this one here. He won't even let me write a shopping list without his prior approval. Keeping the audience's energy up for a show that's devolved somewhat into lazy brand warfare booking is a bit of a challenge, so it requires a solid opener to warm up the crowd and get the adrenaline pumping for the night ahead. And in its, would we say, storied history, there have been more than a few curtain jerkers that did just that. I'm Dan, hailing from partsFUNknown, and here are the 10